Om Namo Narayanaye. Om Namo Narayanaye.
Asmad Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Parama Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Sarva Gurubhyo Namaha. So today we're going to start a book called Greatness of Sharanagati. Sharanagati means property, it means surrender. So greatness of Sharanagati in Sri Vaishnavism. Looks like there's a picture of Lord Varaha on the front. And of course there's a Varaha Charma Sloka, which is got to do with Sharanagati or property or surrender to God, which is spoken about in Sri Vaishnavism. Even in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, Baladev Vidyabhushana mentions in his commentary on Vishnu Sahasranam, Mahavaraho Govinda Shushena Knakangadi is in Vishnu Sahasranam, and the commentary by Baladev also mentions a sloka from Varaha Purana by Lord Varaha, where he says that at the time of death, if you don't remember me, I remember you. I will remember my devotee. So this is a part of understanding property or Sharanagati. So let's continue on. Greatness of Sharanagati in Sri Vaishnavism by Dr. C. Uma Kantam, MA PhD, Department of Philosophy, Venkateshwara University, Tirupati. Okay. Here we have a quote from the Bharadvaja Samhita, which is a Pancharatra Agama. The Pancharatra Agamas have spoken about property. Specifically, we have the Angas of Sharanagati. Most people will be familiar with the verse Anukulyasya Sankalpa Pratikulyasya Varjana, etc., which gives the 6 Angas or 6 limbs of property or Sharanagati. And this verse appears not only in the Lakshmi Tantra or Lakshmi Samhita of the Pancharatra Agama, but also in the Ahirbunya Samhita of the Pancharatra Agama. So let's have a look at this verse, Tiruvai 6.10.10, and I will show you the translation of that. So the translation of Tiruvai 6.10.10 is, O Lord, you bear the inseparable lotus dame on your chest, meaning Goddess Lakshmi on the right side of the Srivatsa, the place where she resides on Lord Vishnu's chest. O my master of matchless fame, bearing the 3 worlds. Right, so again, we can think of Lord Varaha here. Lord Varaha is holding up Mother Bhumi, is holding up the Earth planet, bearer of the 3 worlds. O Lord of Venkatam, Venkateshwara or Tirupati Balaji in Andhra Pradesh is being addressed here specifically. Of course, he's an incarnation of an Archa avatar, a deity incarnation of the Supreme Lord Sriman Narayana, desired by the celestials and great sages, falling at your feet. Right, this refugeless self has found his refuge. So this is an expression of Nam Alwar, who is the head of the Alwars, the 12 great Tamil saints of Sri Vaishnavism, and of Bhakti in general. They're propounders of Bhakti Yoga and Bhakti devotional service and devotional love of God in South India and all over India. And he is saying, I have no refuge, but I'm refugeless, but in anyhow, I've found a refuge at your lotus feet. So surrendering to the lotus feet or falling at the feet of God or falling at the feet of anyone is considered to be a type of surrender. So here, this verse of Namalwar speaks about the attitude of surrender. And it's very interesting also in the context of Sri Vaishnavism that the Lord is addressed first of all in Namalwar's surrender here to the Lord of Tirupati, Lord Venkateshwara. He mentions first of all the Lord who has Lakshmi, who has also got Lakshmi on his chest, because Lakshmi is an integral part of the process of surrender as understood by Ramanuja and the Sri Vaishnavas. So that was Tiruvai 6.10.10. Tiruvai is the about 1,100, it's over 1,000 verses in Tamil, in the Divi Pravandams, Nalaya Divi Pravandam of the Alwars of South India, authored by Nam Alwar. Okay, so let's continue on. Sharanagati, which is an absolute and unconditional self-surrender, invokes God's grace. It is exalted as one of the easiest and most efficacious sadhanas to moksha. Okay, so moksha means liberation. Sadhana is a process or an upaya, you say sometimes a means, to attain that liberation. Liberation from what? Liberation from this material cycle of birth and death, which in Hinduism and Vaishnavism is called samsara, the wheel of birth and death. So when Sharanagati or self-surrender is adopted as a sadhana or a means of attaining moksha liberation, the complete responsibility of the aspirant's spiritual progress vests with God. So unlike other paths of karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, or any other path that different philosophical or religious traditions lay down, for a person to achieve a spiritual goal, in this case, the liberation of the self from the cycle of birth and death in this material world, the process of property is completely different, or Sharanagati is considered completely different, because that sadhana does not involve the person to a great extent who is being saved, but it is fully the responsibility for attainment of the goal of liberation is vested in God. And because God is completely qualified and completely able to achieve anything by his divine will, simply by willing something, it therefore must succeed. It must always succeed. The aspirant, and it also makes it very easy too, because there are no qualifications that a person has to fulfill to attain the goal, right? To take to a certain path and to attain the goal. The aspirant takes refuge in God with full awareness of the bond existing between him and the God. God, who is a father of all creations, does not expect anything except unconditional love from the aspirant. Sharanagati only reiterates the filial bond which exists between the aspirant and God, whose grace is there for all, like a mother's selfless love for her child. What is required from the aspirant is a constant remembrance and supreme faith in God's grace. Okay. So there's a foreword given here, so let's have a look at the foreword. It gives me great pleasure to write a foreword to the book, Greatness of Sharanagati and Sri Vaishnavism, so nicely brought out by Dr. C. Umakantam, Associate Professor, Department of Philosophy, Sri Venkateswara University, Tirupati. I know full well that Dr. Umakantam, imbibed in the doctrine of Sharanagati or surrender, and years together studied constantly the ancient texts and prepared this book with great dedication and devotion on Alwars and Acharyas. So he has great devotion in Alwars to the Acharyas. Sri Vaishnavism is a unique word in the sense that it enlightens the characteristics of Vishnu, who is all-pervader, creator of the universe, and so on, as revealed in Vedas and Vedanta. Vedas, the word Veda means, of course, Veda. The word Vishnu does mean all-pervader, the Lord, the Supreme Lord who pervades everything. And Veda means knowledge, Vedanta means the end of all knowledge, and it usually describes the Upanishads, which are part of the Shruti or the Vedas, which has been heard in the meditation of the rishis in ancient times. So Vedanta is a system of philosophy, or a school of philosophy, which is based, it's also called Uttaramimamsa, or the second deliberation, second type, the later deliberation. There's an earlier deliberation, which is on ritual acts, or karmakanda, and the later deliberation on on philosophical understanding or philosophical doctrines is called Uttramamsa or Vedanta. The word Shri in Shri Vaishnavism, so they're talking here about Shri Vaishnavism as distinct from any other type of Vaishnavism, right? Shri signifies the inseparable relationship of Mahalakshmi. Mahalakshmi means the goddess Sri Devi or Lakshmi, who is the consort of the Supreme Lord, with Vishnu as his consort and mother of all creatures. She's called Jagat Mataram or Asmad Mataram, my mother or the mother of the universe by Ramanujan's Saranagati Gadya. It is also to be known that in Vaikuntha Loka, or Vishnu Loka here, which is also called Vaikuntha Loka, the heaven of Sri Vaishnavism, the eternal heaven of Sri Vaishnavism, with a view to uplifting the people from samsara, that wheel of birth, death, and old age and disease in this material world, and rebirth. Vishnu emerged as Mahavishnu on the Shravana star, and his consort emerged as Lakshmi in the lotus, and Vishnu preached the three rahasyas, or the three secret prayers or mantras, the Tiru mantram, or the 8-syllable mantra Om Namo Narayanaya, the Dvaya mantram, which is in two parts, Sriman Narayana Charano Sharanam Papaji, Srimate Narayanaya Namaha, and the Charama Sloka, or the last verse of instruction given by the Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, verse 8, chapter 18, verse 66, Sarvadharman Parityaja, Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja, Ham Tva Sarvapapebhyo Mokshayishyami Masuchaha. So here he's talking about Lord Vishnu appears, Mahavishnu appears in an avatar form, right? Lord Venkateshwara is considered to be the arch avatar, the deity form incarnation. And his appearance day is marked by the nakshatra, or the star of Shravana. Shravana is that there are 27 or 28 stars which represent the different constellations that are seen from the earth around the ecliptic, and each one of them is seen according to the Indian lunar calendar, is seen to govern particular days. And when the Shravana star was governing a particular day, this incarnation of Mahavishnu appeared. And it's saying here that his consort Lakshmi also appeared in this world from a lotus. There's also a Puranic story that she appeared from the churning of the ocean of milk, which you can read about if you read some of the Puranic episodes of the affairs between the deities and the Danavas, or the demon, the Suras and the Asuras, the devoted celestials and those who are against those devoted celestials. Okay, so in turn, Sri Devi, Mahalakshmi, taught them to Vishvaksena. So here, what's being explained here in the foreword is they're explaining what is called the Guru Parampara, or the succession or lineage of teachers. So this is described also by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, Evam Parampara Praptam Imam Raja Sarvapadu. Krishna says that I have spoken this transcendental knowledge, this spiritual knowledge that I'm going to speak to you, Arjuna, who is speaking to in the Bhagavad Gita, his disciple, his friend. And he's saying, I've spoken this before. And when I spoke it before, I spoke it to somebody who spoke it to someone else, who spoke it to someone else, like that. So in this way, the knowledge was handed down. And this is considered a type of lineage by which the philosophy and doctrines of Sri Vaishnavism is passed down. It starts with Vishnu or Mahavishnu, the Supreme Lord Sriman Narayana, and then is passed these mantras and the meaning of these mantras, these prayers, the Tira mantra, Dvaya mantra, and Charma Soka, which have everything to do with the subject matter that we're talking about here, which is Saranagati, or property, surrender to God, as a means to getting free from this material world of birth and death. So this knowledge was first of all handed over from the Lord himself, Sriman Narayana, to Mahalakshmi, his divine consort, And from her, it was passed on to Vishvaksena. Now, Vishvaksena, according to our understanding, is what is called a Nityasuri. A Nityasuri or a Nityasiddha, some people call Nityasiddha, an eternally perfected living being, soul, who is living in Vishnu Loka or Vaikuntha Loka, the eternal heaven of Mahavishnu, of Sriman Narayana, and who performs service for the Lord there. So there are several servants who are mentioned there. Of course, there are many servants, unlimited servants there, but usually we hear of Adishesha, we hear of Garuda. Adishesha is the Lord's couch, Garuda is the Lord's vehicle, and Vishvaksena is like the secretary of the Lord, or he may be the chief or general of the Lord's army. And Vishvaksena is also worshipped by Sri Vaishnavas instead of the normal worship of Ganesh, which most Hindus perform in order to clear away obstacles in attaining the goal that they want from the Supreme Lord. That is liberation. So Vishvaksena was taught by Mahavishnu, from Mahavishnu to Sri Devi, Mahavishnu's consort, and from Sri Devi to Vishvaksena. From Vishvaksena, now with the fond hope of redeeming, this is explaining the lineage, so who we'll have a look and see. With the fond hope of redeeming the people from samsara, from this material world, and at the behest of Lakshmi, at the behest of the person who gave him the knowledge, Vishvaksena descended from Sri Vaikuntha. He descended from Sri Vaikuntha and did Upadesha. In other words, taught this knowledge of the three rahasyas, the three secret mantras that have to do with surrender, to Namalwar. So Namalwar is this person who appeared in Alwar Tirunagari. So Alwar Tirunagari is down in, it's also called Nanguneri, and it is a place in Tirunelveli district in South India, which is way down south near the tip of South India. So Namalwar appeared there, and it was taught. Vishvaksena descended and taught this. This is the lineage being continued on from the heaven of the eternal heaven of Vaikuntha Loka, coming down to this earth and being taught to Namalwar. Namalwar was one of the 12 Alwars. He was the head of the chief of the Alwars, and we saw that that verse that he wrote in Tamil, Tiruvai Moli 6.10.10, which we discussed just now. So the central theme of the three rahasyas, or the three mantras which have to do with surrender, is that the Lord is the means to attain moksha by surrendering oneself, the means to attain liberation by surrendering oneself. Actually, the Dwaya mantra, the second mantra which I mentioned, which is in two halves, right, is called Mantra Ratna. So the first mantra was the Astakshara mantra, or it is also called the Tiru mantra. The word Tiru in Tamil means Shri. So we can call it the Shri mantra, the beautiful mantra, the great mantra, like that. And it is made up of 8 syllables, Om Namo Narayanaya, right? The next mantra, right, is called the Mantra Ratna. The Dwaya mantra is called the Mantra Ratna. What that means, the gem, the crest jewel of mantras. Now this Sriman Narayana Charanam Sharanam Bhavate Shrimate Narayana Namaha in two halves. It speaks about Saranagati or surrender, and the very mantra is called Saranagati. So amongst Sri Vaishnavas, the jargon, or the Sri Vaishnava jargon or terminology, is that if we talk about Saranagati mantra, we're talking about this particular Dwaya mantra made up of two halves like that. Namalwar, the head of the Alwars, popularly known as Prapana Jana Kutasta. Prapana means a refugee, a person who's taken refuge at the feet of Sriman Narayana. Jana means a person, right? Kutasta, so this is one name of Namalwar. Did Sharanagati, or he surrendered, at the flower-adorned feet of Lord Srinivasa, meaning Venkateshwara, Lord Venkateshwara and Tirupati. So he's saying here that that Namalwar surrendered to the Lord of Tirupati. His Prabandham of Tiruvai Moli is called Dirga Sharanagati. The word Dirga in Sanskrit means long. So we can chant a mantra, or we can offer a prayer, or we can do something very simple to surrender to the Lord. Here we see that Namalwar expanded that. Instead of simply chanting Sriman Narayana Charno Sharam Bhavati Shrimati Narayana Namaha, which is a very short 2 sentences mantra called Dvaya Mantra or Mantra Ratna, right? He expanded that to thousands of verses. And those thousands of verses, we just explained one of them called Tiruvai Moli. Tiruvai Moli is there are several works by him. One work is his major work is Magnum Opus is the Tiruvai Moli. So that is Dirga Sharanagati. So we can say that the prayers of the divine Tamil saints, the 12 Tamil saints, the Alwars, are an expansion of the ideas of surrender given in these 3 short mantras. But the meaning is the same. The quintessence of Sharanagati was propagated by acharyas. Acharyas means teachers, beginning from Sri Natha Munigal. So from Namalwar, the next person, we don't call the next person an Alwar, but we call him an acharya. So the Sri Vaishnava lineage, we have the Lord, starting with the Lord, then the goddess, who is the Lord's consort, Sri Devi, then Vishwaksena. These are all celestial beings, right? From there, we have Namalwar, who is one of the Alwars. And Alwar means one who is completely immersed in devotion to the Lord. He's diving deep into the ocean of devotion of the Lord, right? And after Namalwar, Namalwar gave this expanded or Dirga Sharanagati, this expanded Sharanagati, in the form of the Nalaya Divi Prabandham, the 4,000 divine Tamil hymns of the Alwars, of the 12 Alwars. He gave this to the next person who was an acharya, the next person in the lineage, Natha Muni. So Natha Muni was the person. Natha Muni, if we put gal on the end or kal on the end of a Tamil word, it makes it plural, and it's simply a sign of respect. So we say Shriman Natha Munigal. And from him, the lineage comes down to Manavalama Munigal, also known as Varavara Muni. So without going into the full lineage between Manavalama Munigal and the Supreme Lord Sriman Narayana coming down, in this forward, he's just mentioned some major people like that. So hence Sharanagati has a unique place in Sri Vaishnavism. Philosophically, the nature of the soul varies in the varied schools of thoughts. So there are different schools of thought in India and outside of India also. In India, basically we have, first of all, we have Astic and Gnostic. Out of the Astic, Gnostic means those that do not follow the Vedas, or the Vedanta, and the Astic are those who do follow the Vedas. So some of them, like Charvaka and Buddha, Jaina, they don't tend to follow. They're considered Gnostic. And Astic schools who follow the Vedas are divided into 6. These are called Saddarshanas. Sad means 6 in Sanskrit, and darshana means ways of looking at the world, ways of looking, philosophical schools, let's say philosophical schools, philosophical methods, ways of doctrines and ways of looking at the world. So Charvaka was the Indian materialist, Nyaya Vaisheshika. So there are these six schools which are called Nyaya Vaisheshika, Yoga, Sankhya, Purva, and Uttamimamsa. We already mentioned Uttamimamsa is also called Vedanta. Now, out of Vedanta, so here he's mentioned he's mentioned Indian materialism or Indian atheism, Charvaka, who was propounded by a sage, a person called Charvaka. I guess we can't call him a sage because he's not a spiritual person, but he's a thinker. Nyaya Vaisheshika, these are two of the six schools, six main schools. Then Advaita is a flavor of Vedanta. It's a type of Vedanta. So there are different flavors of Vedanta because out of the six schools, Yoga, Sankhya, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Purva, and Uttara-Mimamsa, all of them were defeated ultimately by Vedanta, by the Vedantins. And the Vedantins who finally came along and defeated the people who were pushing Karmakanda, the Purva Mimamsa, the deliberation, the initial deliberation of Vedanta, the initial deliberation of the Vedas and the Vedas doctrines. That person who defeated that, person who was pushing that, was a person called Kumarila Bhatta and others. And the person historically who came along and defeated that first was Adi Shankaracharya. He propounded a philosophy called Advaita. So of course there were some different flavors of Vedanta, Beda, and Advaita, and Ramanuja came along and he propounded Vishishta Advaita. Okay, but these are philosophies. These are not really theologies. Theology is a more detailed explanation, and the philosophy is the basis on which the doctrines on which we build the theology of Sri Vaishnavism is also philosophy, is also a philosophy of Vishishta-Dvaita, and also a theology. So, but the philosophy of Vedanta, which has a school of Sri Vaishnavism, underlines the essential nature of the soul as servitude to God. Okay, so this is very, very common amongst Sri Vaishnavas, is that the essential nature of the soul is what? So we understand that there's an Atman, there's a soul, there's a spiritual being which is there within every living being. And that individual soul is a spark, is like a part of God, a tiny, minute particle of God. And but it has a nature, and the nature of the spark is that it is a part of the fire. It is subservient to the fire. So service, the eternal essential nature of the soul, the first thing that Sri Vaishnavism says is that the soul's eternal essential nature is service to God, service to God. So the spark is related to the fire in that, or the sun ray is related to the sun disk or the sun globe, in a relationship of serving the origin. God is the origin of everything. So our because we are very small, we are meant to serve God. So that is our essential nature. Now we find this in other forms of Vaishnavism, in other forms of Vedanta, like that. For example, in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, there's a saying, Jiva Swarupoi, this is Bengali, Jiva Swarupoi, Nitya Krishna Das. Nitya means eternal, Krishna Das means servant of Krishna. Krishna is, of course, Sriman, the Supreme Lord Vishnu, Mahavishnu. So eternally the soul is a servant of the Lord. So this is understood by by all Vaishnavas actually, by all different Vaishnava schools, and there are several different Vaishnava schools. So, but the philosophy of Vedanta, which has a school of Sri Vaishnavism, underlines the essential nature of the soul as servitude to God. Beginning in the chapter of this book, Dr. Umakantam ably shows the importance of the soul in Sri Vaishnavism and develops the topic of Saranagati, or surrender, from the Vedas, all the way from the Vedas. This is not a new idea, surrender to God. It's not a new idea. So what we're going to see that this is also stated in the Upanishads. So it has grounding in very, very ancient texts, the philosophical understanding given us by the Vedic rishis. So from the Vedas all the way down to the Alvar's hymns, and later on the writings of the different acharyas as well in the lineage of Sri Vaishnavism. So it's the Sharanagati, or surrender to God, is developed. The theme is developed. Tracing the origin of Sharanagati in the Rig Veda, he elucidated the philosophy of Sharanagati as spoken in Upanishads like Chandogya Upanishad and Katha Upanishad. So right there and then, the first Veda is the Rig Veda, So I mentioned Saranagati is there in the Rig Veda. Saranagati is also there in Chandogya and Katha Upanishads, which are very, very important. They're part of the first 8 or 10 major Upanishads. So out of 108 or so, there are maybe some more, but there are 108 generally named Upanishads. And those are very important ones, Chandogya and Katha. The impact of Saranagati, or surrender, on Dhritarashtra, Prahlad, Gajendra, and Ambarisha is an example of the practice of Saranagati. So these are all mentions of different people who, I'm not sure why he mentioned Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra was the king. He was asking about what was happening on the Battle of Gupta. Prahlada was a great prince whose father was against Vishnu, and he surrendered to Lord Vishnu in the form of Narasimha, half man, half lion incarnation. Gajendra, of course, was a Gaja. Gaja means elephant, Indra means king, so he was an elephant, the king of elephants, who had a problem being attacked by a crocodile and who surrendered unto the Lord, and who was saved by the Lord. And all of these stories, and Ambarisha, of course, was also a great devotee of Vishnu. So they're examples of the practice of Saranagati, or the practice of surrender. And these stories about these different personalities can be found also in the Puranas, specifically Vishnu Purana and Bhagavad Purana, and some other Sattvic Puranas. The Puranas there are 18 Mahapuranas, and they're divided up into 3 sections according to the different mode of nature that the people who read them are in. So the Sattvic Puranas, the Puranas in the mode of goodness, there are Puranas in the mode of ignorance, there are Puranas in the mode of passion. And so for the people in those particular modes who are affected more by those particular modes, they can read those different works. The Vaishnavas tend to focus on Puranic works that are in the mode of goodness, like the Bhagavad Purana, the Vishnu Purana, like that. Sattvic Puranas is what they're called. Puranas are simply stories of ancient tales about great devotees of the Lord and incarnations of the Lord. The systemization of Saranagati, or surrender, by the acharyas or teachers, the later gurus, like Yamunacharya, Ramanuja, Pillai Lokacharya, and Vedanta Deshika, are well portrayed in chapter 3. So we'll see later on when we get to chapter 3, we'll see about later acharyas, later teachers in the different lineages of Sri Vaishnavism. Dr. Umakantam does well in presenting the 3 rahasyas, or the 3 secret mantras, Thira mantra, Dvaya mantra, Charma sloka, with word for word to word meaning, as analyzed by Pillai Lokacharya, Vedanta Deshika, besides Manavala Mahamani's commentary on the rahasyas. And if anybody wants to see some more explanation of these rahasyas, we are studying Alaya Pradhanasaram by Vedanta Deshika. We're also studying the different Chilarai Rahasyangal, the minor books on esoteric secrets by Vedanta Deshika. And we're also studying the Mumukshapadi, which is an in-depth discussion by Pillai Lokacharya and Manavala Mahamani on these 3 mantras, like that. So we have those classes. If you look at the YouTube website, you'll see the Mumukshapadi, Abhaya Pradhanasaram, Chilarai Rahasyangal. You'll see the classes being given by several great Vaishnava scholars from India, and they're up on my YouTube page. So the characteristics of a prapana is a mine of information in chapter 5. So he's going through the different chapters. This person is writing forward. The interlink between bhakti and Saranagati, because bhakti is devotion, Saranagati is surrender, like that. So a person who performs bhakti or is devoted to God is called a bhakta and has devotion for God. Whereas the difference is a Saranagata or a prapana, a person who has taken shelter of God, is like a refugee. So some person is a devotee who follows bhakti yoga, and a person who follows Saranagati, or who is called a prapana, is a refugee. He is simply taken refuge of the Lord. As the eyes interlink of Bhakti and Sharanagati as eyes of one finds elaborate exposition in chapter 6. Dr. Umakantam, after an in-depth study of varied texts, assiduously tries to give an astounding observation that Sharanagati is the easy sadhana, the easy method, through Acharya Abhimana. Acharya Abhimana is where a person may think an easy way to reach the Lord or to attain liberation is simply to surrender to God, but some people, they don't even know how to do that. How do I surrender to God? And so for those persons, there is an even easier form, which is called Acharya Abhimana. Acharya Abhimana is a type of surrender where one simply says, I don't know God, I don't know how to surrender to God or to pray to God, but I do know my teacher, my guru, my Acharya. And so if I simply take shelter of my Acharya will take me to God, will help me to reach God, like that. So, of course, normally in Sri Vaishnavism, Acharya Abhimana and property, surrender to the Lord, surrender to the divine goddess Mahalakshmi, and surrender to the Acharya, these are all combined. But there are examples of people who exemplified this simply taking shelter of the Guru as the final and most simple way of attaining liberation, like that. So, for instance, Madhurakati Alwar, out of the 12 Alwars, one of them was Andal. She was a lady saint who was considered an incarnation of Bhudevi, the goddess of the earth. The other 11, out of those 11, 10 of them surrendered to the Lord and wrote wonderful devotional songs in Tamil praising the Lord. And one of them, Madhurakati Alwar, was the disciple of Nam Alwar, and he simply wrote one set of prayers, which was mostly simply praying to his guru. This is called Kananun Siddhatamba, and it's in praise of Nam Alwar, mostly. So it does of course mention the ideas of property and everything like that, but it is the example of Acharya Abhimana, where somebody simply surrenders to the Acharya. Dr. Umakantam deserves our so Acharya Abhimana is very easy for the upliftment of people from samsara. Dr. Umakantam deserves our hearty congratulations for the splendid work he has done, assuming himself as a Bhagavata. Bhagavata means a devotee or a Vaishnava, a person who worships or loves Bhagwan. Bhagwan is a Sanskrit word which means the person who has six infinite qualities in full. All these different infinite qualities, all great, all powerful, all knowledgeable, all pronounced, all these different qualities all at one time. That is the Supreme Lord. I'm sure this book will find a place in the shelves of university libraries as a guide to young scholars who have a thirst for knowledge and wish to specialize in Sri Vaishnavism. Okay, and this is signed by M. Vardarajan, so another Sri Vaishnava who's written this, and probably a scholar. Now, the preface says, this is going to be by the author, Dr. Umakantam. Since my school days, I've been fascinated towards Sri Vaishnavism, a religious philosophy, not just a theology, which gives God realization to man. This was further intensified by my devotion to Lord Sri Venkateshwara of Tirumala, right? The deity of the Balaji, Lord Venkateshwara in the Tirumala temple, which is at the top of the Tirupati hills, who is the supreme deity of this universe. The truth which dawned on me later. So he had faith in the deity of Lord Venkateshwara, and gradually that faith increased until he understood that this is the Supreme Lord, Srimanarayan. With this conviction, I did my post-graduation in philosophy at Sri Venkateshwara University, which is the university situated at the base of the hill, in the year 1978. Having had the taste of Sri Vaishnavism from Professor M. Viraihi Garu, gave the topic in the field of Vaishnavism for my PhD research program and ably guided me. To this field of research, I was fully drawn by the late Sri Ubaya Vedanta. Usually Sri Vaishnava scholars, a lot of times they will put uve in front of their names. The u stands for ubaya in Sanskrit, the ve for Vedanta. So ubaya means both, right? It means two, and Vedanta means the end of all knowledge. So there are two forms of Vedanta which are accepted in Sri Vaishnavism: the Sanskrit Vedanta of the Upanishads and the Tamil Vedanta of the works of the Alvars. So that's why they say Ubaya Vedanta. Ubaya Vedanta, T.K. Gopala Swami, Iyengar Swami. Okay, so, and the word Iyengar in Tamil is a normal Tamil Sri Vaishnava surname, but it indicates the word Ainda in Tamil, which means five. So if we count to five, the five is Ainda in Tamil. So Iyengar is a person who has taken the Panchasamskara, or the five sacraments, the five sacred rites of initiation into Sri Vaishnavism. So that is an Iyengar, and it's used as a Sri Vaishnava surname. An erudite scholar in Sanskrit and a descendant of Acharya Periya Tirumalai Nambi. So Nambi means a person who's a person who is a respected person. Tirumalai means the Tirumala hills, and Periya means big in Tamil. So Periya Tirumalai Nambi, who was a particular person of the 10th century. So he was encouraged in his research by the person who was doing his PhD research guidance, and also by this person, Sri Ubaya Vedanta, T.K. Gopala Swami Iyengar Swami, who was a descendant of Acharya or Guru Periya Tirumalai Nambi from the 10th century. Sri Vaishnavism preaches the Vedic truths of Saranagati, or surrender. The doctrine of Saranagati was further enlightened by the Alvars in Nalayira Divya Prabandham. Nalayira, the word Nalayira in Tamil means Nala Ayira. Nala means four, and Ayira means 1,000. So 4,000, Divya, divine. Prabandhas means the verses, the Tamil verses of the Alvars. It was during the period from the 10th to the 15th century, the doctrine of Saranagati, or surrender, was further enriched by acharyas, or teachers, beginning from Sriman Natha Munigal, who we mentioned was given these secrets by and given the Prabandhas by Namalwar. Yamunacharya, who came after him, a couple of acharyas after him. Ramanujacharya, who again came further after him. Pilalokacharya, who was again later after. Vedanta Deshika, Pilalokacharya and Vedanta Deshika were contemporaries. And then later on by Manavalama Muni and scores of other acharyas or teachers. The legacy that they left years ago paved the way for the propagation of Sri Vaishnavism in the 20th century by a galaxy of traditional scholars like Kanchi Mahopadhyaya. So Kanchi is a town in South India where Sri Vaishnavism is actually, Kanchi is actually divided into two halves. Vishnu Kanchi and Shiva Kanchi. Usually the Vaishnavas live on the Vishnu side and Shaivites live on the Shiva side. So Vishnu and Shiva Kanchi. But Kanchipuram is an important spiritual Vaishnava holy place. One of four temples which are very much revered amongst the 108 Divyadeshams, or divine places spoken of by the Alvars. These four are very Tirupati, Kanchi, Srirangam, and Melkote, or Tirunarayanapuram in Mysore. So this Kanchi is a famous place. So he's mentioning traditional scholars of a person from Kanchi, and he gives him the name Maha Upadhyaya. Upadhyaya means teacher, great teacher. So he's a great teacher. Jagadacharya, teacher of the world, right? Simha Senadipati, right? So he is the person who sits on the lion throne, right? Of the great Acharya, right? Which we call a Simhasana, or sometimes it's called a Vyasasana, a place where the Acharya, or the great teacher, the world teacher, the Jagat Guru, sits. and his name is Ubaya Vedanta. Again, those appellations mentioning that he's proficient or follows the schools of the Alwars and of the Vedanta, the Tamil and the Sanskrit Vedanta. Pratibadi Bhayankaram, right? Pratibadi Bhayankaram Anangaracharya Swami, right? Okay, so that's a big mouthful. Normally, when you hear Sri Vaishnavas mention a person called PBA Swami, it means Pratibadi Bhayankaram Anangaracharya Swami. But in short, people say PBA Swami, right? And he was a great scholar there. Another scholar he's going to mention is Sri Ubaya Vedanta Karapankadu Venkatacharya Swami of Chennai, Chennai being previously called Madras, the capital of the Tamil state, Tamil Nadu. Abhinava Deshika Sri Ubaya Vedanta Uttamur Veera Raghavacharya Swami, a very famous scholar who printed many books on Sri Vaishnavism. Adhyatma Bhaskara Bhak Amrita Varshi Sri Ubaya Vedanta K. Vardacharya Swami of Chennai, again of Madras, were among the scholars whose names are worthy to mention. So he's mentioning all these different scholars who have preached the system of Saranagati or property in the 20th century. In recent past, the following crusaders like Sri Vaishnava, Simham means great lion, right, of the Sri Vaishnavas, Sri Ubaya Vedanta S. Krishnaswamy Iyengar Swami, Sri Vaishnav Sudarshanam Trichy, who is a person who I have met, who is, of course, no longer with us, who lived in a place called a suburb of Trichy called Warrior, where there is a temple of the goddess Mahalakshmi, and he was a very famous scholar, and he's mentioned here Sri Vaishnava Sudarshanam, which is his publication, his magazine that he used to print. Sri Ubaya Vedanta M.R. Rajagopal Iyengar, Sri Ubaya Vedanta Professor N.S. Anantarangachar of Mysore, who has also printed several books on Sri Vaishnavism. Sri Ubaya Vedanta Professor V.V. Ramanuja Swami, Yetiraj Paduka, Chennai, right? Yetiraj is actually the Tamil way of saying Yatiraj, or the king of sannyasis, which is the name of Ramanuja. Sri Ubaya Vedanta Professor M. Narasimhachari of the University of Madras. He was the first head of the Department of Vaishnavism at the University of Madras, where I studied Vaishnavism. Sri Ubaya Vedanta Dr. J. Parthasarathi Swami of Ramanujavani, another person who's also no longer with us, who started a magazine called Ramanujavani, the Instructions of Ramanuja, who used to live in Triplicane or Tiruvannikeli, in just near the Parthasarathi temple in Madras. Sri Ubaya Vedanta Professor VKSN Raghavan, another great scholar in Vishishtadvaita and Sri Vaishnavism. And Sri Ubaya Vedanta Professor M.A. Venkatakrishnan of Vaishnava Department of University of Madras, right, who was my professor when I studied in the Department of Vaishnavism. I also first met him when I was microfilming ancient manuscripts in the manuscript department. He was a reader in Sanskrit before taking over from Dr. M. Narasimhachari, who was previously mentioned, as the head of the Department of Vaishnavism at the University of Madras. And Sri Ubaya Vedanta A. Krishnamacharya Swami of Sri Vaishnava Sri Rangam. So this is my best friend and Sri Rangam's father, who's still there living and still putting out wonderful books on Sri Vaishnavism. And Sri Vaishnava Shri is his organization. They print books on Sri Vaishnavism and also do many other projects. So anybody that's going to Sri Rangam, they can go to Sri Vaishnava Shri. It's at 214 East Udra Street, Sri Rangam. And you can see Mr. Vasu Krishnamacharya, his son, and also meet Sri Ubaya Vedanta A. Krishnamacharya Swami. And if you meet him, you can please offer my respects to him. And others did yeoman service for the development of Sri Vaishnavism. I profusely thank the above scholars of excellence and prostrate before them with great reverence. Since the advent of my ambition to bring out this book on the topic entitled The Greatness of Saranagati or Surrender in Sri Vaishnavism, I have had the golden opportunity to have the constant blessings of Sri Vaishnava Simham. Again, this means the lion of Sri Vaishnavism, octogenarian, an 80-year-old, Nyaya meaning logic, Vedanta meaning the end of all knowledge in the Upanishads. So he was an old scholar in logic and in Vedanta. Vidvan means a scholar. Sri Ubaya Vedanta T.A. Krishnamacharya Swami, an erudite scholar in Ubaya Vedanta, the two Tamil and the Sanskrit Vedantas, and descendant of Acharya Tirumalai Anandalwan, of the 11th century. And if you would like also to study Mumukshapadi by Pilalokacharya with a commentary by Manavalama Munigal, we have also another descendant of Tirumalai Andan of the 11th century, Dr. Alwar, right, who's teaching that. So you have to look for those classes on the YouTube channel, Vaishnava Dharma International YouTube channel, who is a prime teacher of my Acharya. So here he mentions his Acharya, Sri Ubaya Vedanta Dr. M. Varadarajan Swami, Department of Tamil, SV, so means Sri Venkateshwara University in Tirupati. So it seems like this Dr. M. Varadarajan is the person who wrote the foreword for Dr. Umakantan. I pay my sincere obeisance, respects to Sri Ubaya Vedanta T.A. Krishna Acharya Swami. It was his disciple, Dr. Varadarajan Swami, who inspired me by explaining the inner truths of my topic with original texts like Alwar's hymns with commentaries. Vedanta Sangraha, which is a book by Sripad Ramanuja, one of the 9 books that he actually wrote himself. Mumukshapadi, which I mentioned, which is again an esoteric secret book of the secrets, 3 meanings of the 3 mantras, written by Pilalokacharya and commented on by Manavala Mamuni. Srivachana Bhushanam, also by Pilalokacharya, also with a commentary by Manavala Mamuni. Tattvatraya, also by Pilalokacharya, etc. So there are many, many books that this Dr. Umakantan has gone over for over 2 years, which enabled me to lay my pen to write this sacred book. The objective of this book is to give a critical, and when we say critical, he means it in the scholarly sense. He's not criticizing the system of property. What he's doing is he's going through it piece by piece, and he's showing us what parts of it to understand and how to understand it in a critical, in a scholarly way. And comprehensive, a critical and comprehensive account of the greatness of Saranagati and Sri Vaishnavism with special reference to Sri Ramanuja, Pilalokacharya, and Vedanta Deshika. This work is exclusively confined to Vaishnavism only because it is not found necessary to attempt any comparison with Advaita Vedanta. So the whole book is based on Vaishnavism, Sri Vaishnavism. And so we don't need to bring in other types of devotion also, because there are other Tamil devotional groups like the Nayanmars, who were the 63 or 64 Tamil saints that spoke Tamil hymns in praise of Shiva. So this he's very, very clear that he wants to only concentrate on Vaishnavism here. And he's not going to even talk about Advaita Vedanta, because there are some aspects of Adi Shankara's has written some things which one could construe to be almost Vaishnava in nature, where he says Bhaja Govindam, one can worship Govinda, and he has made stotra to Lakshmi Narasimha, Kuravalamana stotram. So he's not going to bring in any of that stuff. He's not going to talk about Adi Shankaracharya's philosophy. It's going to be strictly to dealing with the Sri Vaishnava concept of Saranagati. This book is based on Tamil, Sanskrit, and Mani Pravala. Mani Pravala, word Mani means pearl, and Pravala means coral. When we mix pearls and coral, we get a very nice necklace. So Mani Pravala is a medieval language, which is a mixture of Sanskrit and Tamil. Basically, Tamil with Sanskrit vocabulary, Sanskrit jargon with Tamil endings, Tamil grammatical endings. So this is one of the religious languages used by Sri Vaishnavas. Tamil, Sanskrit, and Mani Pravala, which is a mixture of the two. So, original texts of Sri Ramanuja Pillai Lokacharya and Vedanta Deshika and others. Sanskrit words from original texts are used to the extent possible, and accepted English equivalent words are given. For instance, the word Sharanagati is generally referred as property or self-surrender because it has a particular connotation in Vaishnava philosophy for which the other terms do not seem to be adequate. With this sheer interest in Ubhaya Vedanta of Sri Vaishnavism, I have made a maiden effort in preparing this book. As I am not a traditional scholar, there may be some lapses, but as a Sri Vaishnavite, I have prepared this book with great reverence. I welcome any suggestions, if any, for improving this work from the scholars of Sri Vaishnavism, which I can incorporate them in the next edition of the book. So a very humble author, although he's a PhD, he says, I'm simply a Sri Vaishnava trying to explain Sharanagati, explain in a critical way, in a scholarly way, I'm trying to explain the system of surrender to the Lord. And if there's any mistakes, please help me, please give me your comments and for improving this work. Firstly, I am highly indebted to my teacher and guide, Professor M. Virahi Garu, MA, Honours, PhD, former head and BOS, Department of Philosophy, Sri Venkateswara University, Tirupati, for having introduced me to this field of research, but for whose constant encouragement and guidance I would not have completed my PhD work. So we get the idea that this book is actually is his PhD thesis. He was the one who generated interest in me to carry out research in the field of Sri Vaishnavism. I feel that mere thanks to him would be insufficient for all that I have received from him. I thank Sri Ubhaya Vedanta, Dr. M. Vardarajan Swami, MA, PhD, Department of Tamil, Sri Venkateswara University, without whose thought-provoking and meaningful discussions this book would not have seen the light of day in this form. Also, I am always beholden to him for having written a nice foreword to this book, despite his several preoccupations. He is an instrumental cause in publishing this book. I express my deep sense of gratitude to Professor C. Ramahi Garu, MA, Honours, PhD, formerly Dean of Academic Affairs, Sri Venkateswara University, and former head and BOS, Department of Philosophy, Sri Venkateswara University, whose constant encouragement and suggestions helped me in shaping this book in the present form. Professor Ramahi Garu is a versatile scholar and an authority in both Indian and Western philosophy. I am highly thankful to Professor B. Samba Shiva Prasad Garu, MA, PhD, for having gone through some of the chapters, which certainly added depth to this book. I am also thankful to my departmental colleagues who created a congenial atmosphere so as to enable me to publish this book without any hassle. This book is being published with the financial aid of Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanams, TTD, Tirupati, under their scheme, Aid to Publish Religious Books. For this, I must offer my thanks to Sri Dr. P. Krishnamahi Garu, Master in Science, PhD, IAS in the Administrative Service, Executive Officer, TTD, for granting the financial aid to publish this book. My grateful thanks are due to Saraswati Putra, Satavardini Chakravarti, Dr. Medasani Mohan Garu, MA PhD, Director, Annamacharya Project. Annamacharya was a great Sri Vaishnava who wrote a lot of kirtanas in Telugu, all on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sriman Narayana. And they, the TTD, or the Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanams, right? The managers of the temples of Tirupati Tirumala have an Annamacharya project where they have, if you go to their website, you can find out about this Annamacharya project where they revere Annamacharya and bring out, encourage people to study his works and to sing his bhajans. And to Professor H.S. Brahmananda Garu, MA PhD Secretary, Dharma Prachara Parishad, right, which is obviously an organization for establishing Dharma and preaching Dharma for religiosity, whose useful suggestions definitely added to the quality of my book. My thanks are due to Dr. N.S. Ramamurthy Garu, MA, editor, Saptagiri TTD Journal. So Saptagiri is the magazine of the Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanams organization, for his kind cooperation in publishing this book. I thank my wife, Mrs. Usha Rani, MA, MPhil, MPhD, Associate Professor of English, who stood by my side during innumerable inconveniences. I thank my close friends, Dr. V. Purnachandra Reddy, MA, PhD, Professor Director, RAAS, and Dr. D. Dhananjaya Naidu, MSc, PhD, Assistant Professor, Department of Biotechnology, Sri Venkateshwara University, Tirupati, for their constant encouragement. Finally, I thank Sri B.G. Sridhar, BE, Proprietor, University Xerox and Offset Printers, and his staff for their untiring help in carrying out the printing work, and especially for the cover design of this book. So here he's C. Umakantam. He's thanking everybody. And then we're going to have a look at the table of contents. So the table of contents is very interesting. He's got, the first chapter is going to be about the nature and destiny of the soul, then philosophical antecedents to the doctrine of Saranagati, those ideas or philosophical ideas that came, apparently, came before the idea of Saranagati. Saranagati in the Vedas, Saranagati in the Upanishads, Saranagati in the Bhagavata Purana, Saranagati, Dhritarashtra Saranagati, Prahlad Saranagati, Gajendra Saranagati, right? Ambarisha's Saranagati, Saranagati in the Ramayana, the Angas or preconditions of Saranagati traced to Sri Ramayana, Saranagati in the Bhagavad Gita, the Alvars and Saranagati, Moodle Alvars and Saranagati. Moodle, the word Moodle in Tamil means the first Alvars. So the Moodle Alvars are the first three who appeared just prior to the beginning of Kali Yuga, and they are called Pogai, Bhuted, and Pei Alvars, right? So Pogai, Bhuted, and Pei Alvars, who are the Moodle Alvars, right? Then we have Tirumalasai Alvar, who is the next Alvar after them, and Saranagati. Kulashekara Alvar, who was a king of Chera, area of Kerala in southern India. He was also one of the Alvars. Nam Alvar and Saranagati. So again, Nam Alvar and Saranagati. Tonduradi Podi Alvar and Saranagati. Tonduradi Podi Alvar was living in Sri Rangam. And Tonduradi Podi, his name is Vipranarayana. And he was Tondar Adi. Tondar means devotees of Vishnu. Adipodi means the dust from the lotus feet of the devotees of Vishnu. So Tonduradi Alvar and Sharanagati. Tirumangai Alvar, who is the last of the Alvars chronologically, and Sharanagati. Tirumangai Alvar was a minor chieftain who helped in the raising the funds and for building the Sri Rangam temple. So we have then chapter 3. Acharya is the Acharya, so he deals with all the Alvars. Now he's dealing with the Acharyas. Acharya's systematization of Sharanagati. So Sri Nata Munigal and Sri Vaishnavism, Yamunacharya and Sharanagati, Ramanuja and Sharanagati, Pilalokacharya and Sharanagati. Vedanta Deshika and Sharanagati, development of Sri Vaishnavism. The Angas or accessories of Sharanagati. Anukulya Sankalpa and Patikulya Sivarjanam, which are the first of the two of the 6 Angas. Karpanyam, Mahavishvasa. Karpanyam means helplessness. Mahavishvasa means great faith. Goptritva Varnam. Sri Ramayana, the classical example that illustrates the Angas of Sharanagati. Bharanyasam, or complete or absolute self-surrender. Swarupa Samarpanam. This is another way of saying Bharanyasam, or surrender of the self. Bhara Samarpanam, right? Surrender of the burden. So there's 3 aspects to this surrender, right? That he's talking about here, the complete surrender. Surrendering the self, surrendering the burdens, or that we have, which is our karmas, or our the results of our good and bad actions in this world, right? And the pala samarpanam is the same thing as sattvika tyaga, giving up the results of all of our actions. So pala samarpanam literally means surrendering the fruits. Requirements of Sharanagati, types of Sharanagati. Ukti Nishta, there's different types of Sharanagati which are divided up there. There's different things. There's Ukti Nishta, Acharya Nishta, Swanishta. Right? Swanishta is when you surrender and you take it upon yourself to surrender, like that. Acharya Nishta, the Acharya surrenders, and it's Acharya Abhimana, you are surrendering with the help of the Acharya. And Ukti Nishta, when you approach an Acharya and together you surrender, like that, through the agency of the Acharya. So Artha property and Dripta property, right, which has got to do with whether your surrender is filled with feelings that you can stay in this material world until the end of this lifetime, or whether you immediately want to, upon surrender, give up this life and go back to go to the eternal heaven of Sri Vaikuntha, the spring waters, and serve him. So chapter 4, the 3 supreme mantras and rahasyas implying Sharanagati. So the greatness of the Mullah mantra, again, Tira mantra, Mullah mantra, Astakshara mantra, all the same thing, Om Namo Narayanaya, the 8-syllable mantra. The supremacy of Om, which is the first syllable of the 8 syllables, Omkara, which is a transcendental syllable. The meaning of the A in Omkara, because the Omkara, although it's written here as Om, is made up of 3 letters. Akara, Ukara, and Makara. So Kara means a sign or a letter. So the A letter, the letter A is Akara. The letter U, or U, is Ukara. And the letter M is Makara. So these 3 letters give us Om, the transcendental syllable. So the meaning of, he's going to explain the meaning of A, the meaning of the 4th case or dative case ending to the word A, which is not seen in Om, but is there, understood, right? The meaning of U, the letter U in Om, and the letter of M in Om. Then the letter of Namaha, the meaning of Namaha, which is the 2nd word. There are 3 words and 8 syllables in the Tina mantra. Om, Namo, Narayanaya. So 3 words. So having finished with the first word, Omkara, the next word, Namaha, what does it mean? And the final word, Narayana, what does the word Narayana mean? And what does Narayanaya mean? What is the Aya part of Narayana, which is the 4th case or dative case ending for Narayana? Dative case means unto Narayana, like that. The Dvaya mantra is then explained. The greatness of the Dvaya mantra, which is also called Mantra Ratnam, the crest jewel of mantras. The significance of the first word, Shriman, right? What does that mean? The different meanings of the word Shri, right, which refers to the goddess Mahalakshmi. The essence of Shriyate and Shrayate. So there are these two definitions or derivations of the word Shri, which means Lakshmi. One is Shriyate and one is Shrayate. That will be explained. The concept of Shrinoti and Shravayati, right? The meaning of Shrinati and Shrinati, the meaning of the word Narayana, the meaning of the word Charanao, the meaning of the word Sharanam, the meaning of Prapadye, and the meaning of Srimate, the meaning of Narayana, the meaning of Aya in the word Narayanaya, the meaning of Namaha. Okay, so that is breaking down the Dvaya mantra into all its component words and even parts of the words to explain the deep meanings of all those parts. Then the Charma Sloka, meaning the Krishna Charma Sloka, from Bhagavad Gita, the last instruction of Lord Krishna, a summary of the meaning of the Charma Sloka, a meaning of Sarva Dharman, which is the first compound word of the Charma Sloka, the implication of the word Parikjaja, which is the verb in the first sentence of the Charma Sloka, Krishna Charma Sloka, the meaning of the word Mam, which means me, the word Ekam, which means alone or one, means one or alone, the meaning of the word Sharanam, which means to surrender, right, to take shelter of, the meaning of the word Vraja, which is also is a verb also in the first half of the Charma Sloka, the meaning of the word Aham, the meaning of Twa, Aham meaning I, meaning Twa meaning thou or you, the meaning of the compound Sarvapapebhyo, which means free from all sins, or Sarvapapebhyo actually means all sins, but free from all sins is the meaning there. Word Moksha Yishyami, which is the third verb, right? I will take you to moksha. I will take you to liberation. And the syllable or the last part, Masuchaha, which is actually two words, Masuchaha, no, don't fear, that which is the last part of the Charma Sloka. So chapter 5 deals with the conducts and duties of a prapana or a refugee, a person who's taking refuge through Saranagati or surrender to the Supreme Lord. Specific characteristics of the prapana, general characteristics of the prapana. How should prapana spend his life in this world? How prapana should follow the ordinances explained in the Holy Scriptures? How should a prapana atone for any sins that he might commit even after performing prapati? Right? So before or after prapati, the residence of a prapana, where he should live, the daily routines or the routine duties of a prapana. And then that's divided up into what we call panchakala, 5 different times of day. Abhigamana, which is the first duty of the day, Upadana the second, Ija the third, Swadhyaya or Swadhyayam the fourth, and Yoga the fifth. Excuse me. Then chapter 6, Bhakti and Sharanagati. So what is Bhakti? What is Sharanagati? And how do they relate to each other? Bhakti means devotion, Sharanagati means surrender. So Bhakti in the Vedas, the Panishadic thought of Bhakti, the meaning of the word Bhakti, types of Bhakti, relation of the Jiva and God through Bhakti, relation between Bhakti and Sharanagati, relationship between Bhakti and Sharanagati, differences between Bhakti and Sharanagati, the merits of Sharanagati. Then chapter 7, arguments in support of Sharanagati or surrender, the doubts relating to the competence or adhikari, the qualification for Sharanagati, the doubts relating to the nature or swarupa of Sharanagati, its form, and the doubts relating to the accessories or angas of Sharanagati. And then there's a conclusion. So he's given all the doubts in the end here, which is typical and is according to the system laid down in Artha Panchakam by Pila Lokacharya, who talks about, first of all, the means and the goal, but also the impediments. The doubts will be the impediments to reaching the goal. I'm going very thoroughly through this. If you have any questions about that, you can ask them now. But I think I wanted to go through and give a background and explain some of the jargon that's been used by Sri Vaishnavas. And then we'll get to the introduction next time.
Yeah, okay. it was very, very detailed. And especially going through, you had started off by saying should have written down all the notes. With the Varaha Charam Shlok.
Right.
And,
Which is not really going to be touched on probably much in this book.
Much in the book, yeah.
Right.
And you stated that it was the 3 steps of referring to Lord, the 3 worlds of Varaha. I think you spoke the 3 strides, sorry. And you said the 3 strides referred to
Varaha didn't take 3 strides. Trivikrama took 3 strides.
That's why
Idam Vishnu Vichakrame Treda Nidade Padam Samudamasya Pagum Sure Treda Nidade Padam. He took 3 strides, is Trivikram avatar.
Yeah. You spoke about the 3 strides of Vamandev, but you have there was a try something with Lord Varaha. I was trying to recall. Maybe the 3 worlds he upheld that you were referring to.
He says in Tiruvai 6:10:10, he talks about the Lord holding up the 3 worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it can be understood in a figurative way that the Lord supports all the 3 worlds because the Lord, everything comes from the Lord. He's the origin of everything and he supports the whole universe, right? It can also be understood in a literal sense. In his incarnation as the great boar, he held the world up. That's the picture that's given on the front cover.
Yeah.
So it can be understood in several different ways. The Lord supports everything because the Lord pervades everything, but he also supports everything when he comes in his avatar as Lord Varaha. He supports everything.
Yes, it's quite amazing as you noted that you especially going through, seeing all the different personalities. But I mean, as a for a person like me coming from the Gaudiya Sampradaya perspective, and seeing all these different the new jargon. I mean, it's Sanskrit.
New jargon. There's new jargon involved, and that's why I wanted to introduce by going through each and every part of the book and explaining the jargon as we go along. It'll be easier for people who don't know Sri Vaishnava jargon to understand. Right?
Yeah. And then I'm quite amazed, especially the last part of it, where you said the ASA, especially last part, where you were saying there were certain accessories and all these things.
Right.
You know, the first thing when something comes to mind about surrender, you think, all right, you're coming to the Lord without any. Well, I mean, I would think the accessories would be the qualities, possibly.
Qualifications.
Usually
people take them as qualifications, okay? But there's 2 different ways of looking at it. There are two main schools of Sri Vaishnavism. There's the Vadagalai and the Tenkalai. There's the northern school or the Kanchi school, and there's the southern Sri Rangam school of Vaishnavas. The northern school with Vedanta Deshika, they tend to look upon these angas or limbs or accessories of Saranagati or surrender as being pre-qualifications, right? And the southern school, the Sri Rangam school, tend to look at these things as being angas or accessories of Sri Vaishnava, which are outcomes of the surrender. So they're post-qualifications. They're not pre-qualifications. So in other words, all prapanas will have these different accessories or limbs of Sharanagati, but they're not, because Sharanagati is completely dependent upon the Lord. The southern Sri Rangamacharyas say, therefore, it can't be considered a prerequisite, because there can't be any prerequisite if Sharanagati or property or surrender to the Lord is completely dependent upon the Lord. Then it's not dependent on anything that we can do or not do. It's not dependent on our qualifications or disqualifications. So therefore, these things can't be actually considered to be qualifications or disqualifications, not having them. They have to be accepted as coming along with the Sharanagati, right? Being produced from the Sharanagati, from the surrender, like that. So some people see it as a pre-qualification, some people see it as a post-qualification. The point is that even the northern school, even the followers of Vedanta Deshika accept that they are placing everything, they're placing all their faith in the Lord and surrendering to Him, and it's completely up to the Lord. It's completely the Lord that's doing everything. So all of these ideas of having pre-qualification is really theoretical, because both schools accept that the Lord is the instrument, the Lord is the upaya, the Lord Himself is the means, and not the devotee, not the prapana, not the refugee. Right? This is where we get into the idea that there's a difference between a devotee and a refugee. Just like now there's a war going on in Europe, and there are people who are leaving that place and they have nothing. They only have the clothes on their back. They have nothing. They have no money. They have no wealth. They have nothing. They only can leave and go, and they're completely at the mercy of the people in another country where they go. These people are called refugees. So the idea of property is to be a refugee means you have nothing. You have no qualifications. You have no nothing, right? You're simply dependent 100% on the mercy of the person that you're surrendering to, which means Sriman Narayana, through the agency of Mahalakshmi and your Acharya. Whereas a devotee might have riches. He might have this. He might have so many good qualifications also. He might be a perfect Brahmin. He might know the Vedas. He may have some disqualifications for being a bhakta, for being a devotee. He might have some disqualifications, right? Like he might be like Shishupal. He might be inimical towards Krishna, right? So when bhakti is concerned, we have to worry about qualifications and disqualifications, because we have to be qualified, and we have to, in order for bhakti to work. But for Sharanagati, for surrender to work, for property to work, we don't have to have any qualifications. It's the Lord Himself who makes it work. He's the method, like that. So that is difference, and we're going to get into the difference when I'm sure He'll bring out that difference in the book somewhere.
It reminds me of years ago, I started reading a book on Vallabhacharya, and they talk about Poshana.
Vallabhacharya talks about Maryada Bhakti, yeah, and about Maryada Bhakti and something. It's like Raganuga Bhakti is what he talks about. He talks about Pushti Bhakti. So Pushti Bhakti and Maryada Bhakti. So when a Balaba says to you Pushti Bhakti and Maryada Bhakti, when a Gaudiya says to you Raganuga Bhakti and Vaidhi Bhakti, right? A Sri Vaishnava will say property and Bhakti Yoga. So this is just different terminology, but basically means the same thing. Yeah. But Rupa Goswami has quoted this verse, Anukulyasya Sankalpa Pratikulyasya Varjana. And Vedanta Deshika and Pilaloka, they also quoted it. But Rupa Goswami when he quotes it, he says it's about bhakti. When the Sri Vaishnavas quote it, they say it's about Sharanagati, about property. The verse itself ends in the word Sharanagati. But Sharanagati is seen in Gaudiya Vaishnavism as an accessory of bhakti, right? It's a part of bhakti, like Navada Bhakti, like Atmani Vedanam, complete surrender, right? Yes. It's seen as a part of bhakti. In Sri Vaishnava system, property is seen as a separate method. Yeah. Because the person who performs it is actually Sriman Narayana. The person who does it is Sriman Narayana and not us, right? Whereas the idea in Gaudiya Vaishnavism is a cooperation, right? In Sri Vaishnavism, we're talking about the causeless mercy of God. We can't cause that mercy in any way. But in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, we talk about cooperative grace. We get the grace of God only by cooperation.
Om Namo